they're not going to care about in the future whether or not we pursued nuclear energy. They're going to care about the fact that everything is extinct in the environment. Like, oh, where'd the wetlands go? And how to actually get to have people care about this issue is to look at the dead things that we're seeing. Dead animals, dead ecosystems. That's how we can kind of like rein people in and think, hey, this is a problem, right? In ecology, this is well known. Environmental health is what we need. Human health is tied to environmental health. And environmental health is actually we know what it is. It's two things. Environmental health is tied to, one, what I wish nuclear energy opponents understood will happen if they win. The year is 2072. Any hope of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius is long dead. Earth's mean temperature is about 2.1 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels and climbing still, with human beings struggling to reduce net greenhouse gas emissions to zero. I mean, it's according to the IPCC's new report and stuff. That's really not that crazy to think about. That's a real possibility. More than 9 people now call this warmer Earth home. Thanks to the advance in clean technology, their everyday activities emit far less CO2 than ours do today. Worldwide fossil fuel emissions are now perhaps 10 gigatons of carbon dioxide per year, around 1/4 of annual emissions to the early 2020s. This is kind of like an interesting part here. Their everyday activities emit less CO2. So where that CO2 is coming from. So the problem with current technologies is that it's carbon that's from the ground and it's exporting into the atmosphere. So I think something that people need to realize is that something that recycles that carbon, takes it down, and then emits that straight up to the atmosphere would have a lot less of an effect than taking that carbon in the ground and then putting it up in the atmosphere. In ecology, that's called a carbon sink. So a sink is something where the atoms or the elements are going to be locked away for a really long time, hundreds of millions of years, and then they get emitted through fluxes. So the flux would be, for example, for the natural flux for a carbon cycle would be dust, like literally wind damaging rocks and that creating little pieces of carbon that would float out. Or fires. Fires is another common one where you're taking those carbon atoms that are inside the tree and then you're exporting it to the environment. I mean, the atmosphere. Naturally, these fluxes, these natural processes are a lot less than what we're doing right now, which is taking a lot of carbon from the ground, which is stored in oils, which is from plants that were 500, 600 million years ago. So the point is that the flux isn't right. We're increasing it a ton, as opposed to what we could be doing with something like algae biofuels. That's a renewable fuel. We could be taking carbon dioxide from the air and then emitting it straight back. The consensus worldwide is that society took far too long to reach even this disappointing milestone. The final push to net zero, scientists and policymakers project, could take another decade. The youth of 2072 blame a multitude of factors for the slow pace of decarbonization, from the entrenched interests of powerful industries and political lobbying groups to insufficient investment to clean energy earlier in the century. But you might be surprised by whom else they blame. So I think that carbon in general, like a net zero, is something that I think where people take put a little bit too much emphasis on. Like, even though we were, I was just talking about renewable fuels and that would help do that, but I still think that in the future, 50 years from now, if we kill off the entire ecosystem, all of our environment, and all the animals and plants are dead, the CO2 ppm in the atmosphere is kind of not that important, right? Because, the environment does things for us that are called ecosystem services. So services for like how we pollinate our plants, for example, is bees. Most of the food you eat is actually pollinated by bees, and bees are having a huge mass extinction event. So it was actually really interesting. There's this paper in I think it was like early 2000 in Nature, and they tried to see how, like, quantify how what's the impact of those ecosystem services, how much are we actually gaining from it. And it was like $3 trillion a year or something, I think, that they did. And then the entire huge pushback came in ecology, and it's like, no, it's not 3 trillion, it's everything. Like, everything that you touch or that you have, you consume, we make, is all tied to the environment and those ecosystem services in some way. So it's hard to imagine an ecosystem or a market or us being able to make goods and all that kind of stuff without a healthy environment. It's from chat. Do you think the recent plastic accord will help? I think, do I have that on here? No, I don't. I talked about that last week. I think it's good. I mean, plastic is a huge problem, obviously, and it's petroleum based too. So it's another one of those carbon problems. I do think, though, there's going to need to be the collection of that old plastic, and then also new plastics that need to be formed. So, for example, bioplastics that are biodegradable. Again, this is something that can actually be made within plants. Algae can be made to actually make plastics, and there's algae surfboards, algae sandals now that are all capable of being made and bought now. It's crazy. They're actually starting. So, biodegradable plastics. So it's not that far off, and a lot of it is learning a really interesting way of making plastics and other materials, biodegradable materials, is diatoms. So diatoms have these incredible shapes, these incredible things that they can make, and these structures that they make, material scientists are actually studying this now. So they're actually studying these structures and how we can arrange things and how to make them, like our existing materials, stronger while also being biodegradable. So by looking to nature, that's a lot of biotechnology is this. We look to nature and look to billions of years of evolution, and then we kind of steal that and we change it a little bit, and then that's what this stuff is. So yeah, plastic waste is really bad. I mean, plastic waste is one of those things too that's kind of interesting, where it's actually from a very small amount of places in the world. So the world's plastic problem comes and is actually very treatable because so much waste actually comes from so few areas. A lot of, like, for example, I'm fortunate enough to actually have trash pickup, right? Where I can put my plastics or recyclables and waste, and that's a whole nother topic. That's probably, recycling, we kind of think about that and we put things in that recycle bin, but it's not 100% recycled conversion, right? The recycling isn't 100% perfect, and that's a whole nother conversation. But a lot of places in the world just don't even have any trash pickup. So what's the first thing that they do? They don't have any other way. They have landfills that leak into the ocean, basically, and that kind of that just happens. Yeah, diatoms are made up of a lot of different materials, and silica is definitely one of them. It is definitely very interesting. So who are these new kids? Who are these kids blaming? From the title, I can say it's probably going to be people that nuclear somehow. In particular, the young adults of 2072 find it absolutely unfathomable that environmentalists 50 years prior could have been so vehemently opposed to nuclear energy. After all, in 2072, nuclear power is commonplace. Perhaps 20% of global primary energy is produced by nuclear reactors. Small nuclear reactors are our normal sight, individually powering factories, mines, island nations, and rural communities. With larger reactors and clusters of 6 to 12 small units supply heat and electricity to cities. All of this nuclear energy is generated as cleanly as that would be produced from solar and wind farms. Students see reactor operation and nuclear engineering as growing clean energy fields that offer promising and prestigious career options. Thanks to enormous advances in safety technology made in the 2010s and 2020s, there will be no notable nuclear accident anywhere in the world for many decades. I mean, that's... oh, man. I mean, that'd be nice. That would be nice if that's true. So this is like kind of where I start having the problem with the piece where, like, look, nuclear reactors make sense for places that are super dense, right? So, for example, like Japan doesn't have the open area for wind or solar, and like a nuclear reactor actually makes a lot of sense there because they don't have the space to expand these wind or solar farms. This, though, I have no idea. All of this nuclear energy is generated as cleanly as that produced from solar. Okay, that's cool that they're actually giving life assessments like things here. I mean, the problem with this idea is that ultimately, like, nuclear energy is not renewable. And this is what we're kind of getting to, it's solar, wind, nuclear, okay? That's generating the electricity. But ultimately, that electricity needs to be stored, right? And how are you going to do that? Well, I mean, you could put, there's a lot of different ways, but common ways now is batteries, right? But batteries is how everything is saved, and it's basically a chemical gradient. And that chemical gradient needs to be maintained, and that's why batteries go bad over time. So, fundamentally, it's just not renewable. So it's kind of hard to imagine that's where a majority of our electricity is going to come from. It's better. Obviously, it's going to be better than. Coal. Or even CNG, which is clean natural gas, and that's from fracking. So I would put it better than those two for sure. Whether or not it's going to be the substitute for renewable energies, that's what I don't understand. People that are really pushing nuclear so hard, and it doesn't. In the end, we need to be switching to renewable fuels. What are renewable fuels? Fuels that can actually be recouped and regenerated over time without damaging the earth. And where are they getting all these, the things that are running inside the nuclear reactors? From my understanding, it's that they're mining it. They're mining these. So here we go. Here's the nuclear power fuel cycle involves the following steps: uranium mining and milling. Okay, so we were right on that one. Extracting ore and then separating out the uranium for transport as uranium oxide. 2, uranium conversion and enrichment. 3, fuel fabrication. 4, power generation. 5, used fuel management. And then 6, high-level radioactive waste management and disposal. So it's like, this is the problem with batteries, electric vehicles, these kind of like things where it relies on an infinite amount of these rare earth minerals like uranium, lithium, and there's just not that many of them. And that's the real problem. I mean, we can be topical. We can talk about what's happening right now in Russia, and who has a lot of the world's rare earth minerals. It's Russia. And it's basically any country that has a high land mass. So you have the continent of Africa. You have obviously Asia is huge, so it has a ton of it, and by land, Russia and China have a ton of rare earth minerals. So they basically can't get away from that fact, as opposed to doing something that's a renewable fuel that we could actually generate on our land with tools and things and technology that we already have. So, I mean, in this sentence is really talking about like a way that people are, these are developing technologies. And that's kind of a problem that I have too. It's like, if we invest into nuclear, then it's going to be better. Yeah, of course. I mean, all renewable fuels are going to get better if we invest in them. And I don't see it as like the return on investment higher than other ones, especially when other alternatives have renewable possibilities. So this is California. California is an interesting test case because we actually had we had the nuclear San Onofre nuclear power plant go out. So you can actually see what happens here. So 2012 is when San Onofre goes out. So 2012 here is when the power goes out. The San Onofre power plant goes out, and you can see a huge drop here nuclear buys us time. You're right, but the thing is that we have other technologies that are already ready to go, and I think that's the false choice that people are being given, is that you get like right now, what's the option? Like if you want to be good for the environment and you want to buy a car, what are you getting? You're getting an electric car. There's only one option. It's like there's multiple ways of going through this, and there's actually more developed technologies that can actually do this already. And I think that's the biggest problem that I have with like nuclear and even batteries with, for electric vehicles on cars. The idea that all this battery waste is going to be a huge problem. Also, your batteries in your car are going to go down over time. And that's the majority of the cost of the car is actually the batteries. So, and then on top of that, we're never going to be able to go electric planes. I mean, it's just impossible. Like literally, there's no way to actually to give enough thrust in order to create flight with an electric like 747. It's like, this just doesn't make any sense. So yeah, as you can see, most places in the country in the United States are natural gas. But I don't know if that's true anymore. Is coal? Okay. It used to be coal. It used to be a majority coal, but I think because of fracking and basically how cheap everything at coal is now, you can actually kind of like, we kind of like switched up. Okay. Yeah. From fossil fuels. So this is from CNG, clean natural gas. Yeah. Electric cars are huge. It's actually a huge problem. It's one of those things where people think they're doing well, but then like, let's say they're going see Nebraska. Nebraska's the majority coal. Or Missouri. If you got a Tesla, you're driving a Tesla in Missouri and you're plugging that thing at the end of the day. You're running that Tesla off of coal. So it's not really, it really matters where the electricity is coming from. So, if it's, like I said, nuclear is probably a lot better than coal, or clean natural gas for that matter. But I don't think that it's the one that we should be focused on. This is a future in which the costs of a missed opportunity decades ago are obvious. Nuclear energy could very well deliver its long-sought technological promises. At the same time, that's just so biased. At the same time, the world at large could easily fall short of climate goals, leading subsequent generations to wonder why their predecessors didn't pursue clean, proven nuclear energy earlier and more aggressively. Such a scenario is all too possible to imagine, even from our perspective today. I mean, like, I'm sorry, but they're not going to care about in the future whether or not we pursued nuclear energy. They're going to care about the fact that everything is extinct in the environment. Like, where'd the wetlands go? Where did these biomes go? Why is everything dead? Why is there's no biodiversity? Why is that? I mean, you could apply that to so many other things other than, the energy consumption. And I have a thing we're going to go over today. The energy consumption is one thing, one piece of the of what we're doing and how we're impacting the environment. We're killing way more animals and way more, a lot more of our environment through a lot of other factors other than just where we're getting our energy from. This is what's told to us, that it's all about CO2 ppm. It's all about our emissions and all that kind of stuff. In reality, it's about keeping our environments healthy. Yeah, because environmental health is human health. I don't think people get that. Chat. I think the point is we have a well-developed nuke energy tech and the means to build them quickly. Buys us time to develop the others and seek others. Yeah, I mean, we do have well-developed energy technology, but the thing is like there's a lot of other technology that that's already ready to go too, like, and that we wouldn't all have to buy electric vehicles. Like if we're going to go all nuclear, like let's just say that we are. I'm not saying that that's what people are recommending. Nuclear requires batteries, so that requires everyone to have electric vehicles, and that's a new vehicle that everyone has to buy now. So I don't think that that's going to be a solution that people are going to readily take up, basically. And really, for electric vehicles, you really need battery swaps. So there's no way that people are going to go from filling up their tank in 2 minutes to waiting 30 to 40 minutes for a tank charge or whatever. That's a full tank recharge, but I understand you can do 10 minutes for 100 miles and get you home in a lot of scenarios, but I really don't feel like electric vehicles are going to take off until we actually get full battery swaps. Today, the future of nuclear power is more assured than many realize, especially once one looks beyond Europe and North America. Regardless of the success of American, Canadian, and British nuclear research efforts, the People's Republic of China and the Russian Federation are already building the next generation of reactors. About 20 new reactors are under construction in China, with at least 30 more units planned. Advanced designs that skeptics of nuclear power have long dismissed as eternally stuck at the research and development stage are now operating commercially, including miniature pressurized water reactors and high-temperature gas-cooled reactors. Russia and Chinese reactor exports are already securing deals across much of the world. Even in Europe, where nuclear capacity has declined over time, attitudes are shifting, with France and the UK both recently signaling intentions to build new reactors. It is only a matter of time before even nuclear-anxious nations reverse course and bolster neglected nuclear energy programs. If people are excited about it, and this is what they go for, go. Like, I think that people should. You want to be a nuclear physicist or figure that stuff out? I think if that's where people are energized and that's where they want to spend their time, it's a good effort, I think, because this is right. The entire world is not going to be off of, solar and wind and hydro. There has to be some type of alternative, and like I said before, it has to do a lot with how dense your country is. So in a lot of European countries, it actually makes a lot of sense to go with nuclear power. I don't know about these. This is something I have to look into. Pressurized water reactors and high temperature gas cooled reactors. This is cool. I didn't know about this. Oh, there's no pictures. And I mean, the thing is, let's be real. China and Russia, the exports, these are, authoritarian governments, and there's positives and negatives of all different types of governments. And one of the real positives of an authoritarian government is that you can say, hey, we're going to increase our renewable energy spending by 500% this year, and we're going to build a bunch of these things, and they can do it. It's one of the the benefits of having something like that, a government like that. democracy and representative democracy in the United States is always going to be a little bit slower on any issue, on every issue, than something like that's authoritarian like that. And I hope that, a lot of the economic and technological prowess the United States had in the 20th century had to deal with our nuclear weapons and all that kind of stuff. So, and our nuclear capacity and our nuclear development and research. So, I think it would be natural for us to continue that. I don't think that is that crazy. In the long run, anti-nuclear advocates will not succeed. It remains an utter fantasy to imagine that activism will bring about an end to the atomic age at a time when nuclear technology is poised for revolutionary steps forward. But in the near term, opposition to nuclear power can certainly succeed in preventing and slowing down the advance of solely needed climate solutions. No. No. Like, this is the problem. Nuclear power will not save the environment from going extinct. It's going to save ppms in the atmosphere from going, too high, and then that could change the environment, and then that could lead to mass extinctions. But we're already on mass extinctions, and that's the problem, is that nuclear power isn't going to stop the mass extinction that's going on right now. And this is why it's so frustrating, where it's like, this isn't a solution to that. This is the real problem isn't CO2 ppms, and this is what's pushed out in the, the scientific press and all that kind of stuff. And I disagree. I'm much more focused on the health of the environment. The fact that 80% of amphibians are critically extinct. 95% of wetlands are going away because humans want to live near the beaches. So that's like the first thing that's taken out is wetlands. Stuff like that has cascading impacts in our environment when it comes to animal populations. How many different species are living there, and then how many of those species are in the environment. And to me, that is a much more interesting, salient, poignant point than whether or not nuclear technology has these revolutionary steps in the forward that could going forward. And it's a problem in that people think about this thing as the climate change, and it's not that. That's a part of it. That is happening, and just like they're going, and I can see in the paragraph in the future, they're talking about 2.5 degrees Celsius by year 2100, and that's bad. But like, our own human-caused mass extinction will have much more impact on our lives more immediately than this. Maybe the 2.5 degrees Celsius by 2100, that could start a positive feedback loop, and it does, because it basically the ice melts, and now ice, instead of reflecting that sun energy, the darker energy, the darker earth underneath it, because obviously it's not going to be white like the snow, is going to absorb that heat. So it is a positive feedback loop. Maybe in 2500 or something, the ppms, the CO2 ppms will have more of an impact then. But the bigger problem, in my opinion, and how to actually get to have people care about this issue, is to look at the dead things that we're seeing. Dead animals, dead ecosystems. That's how we can kind of like rein people in and think, hey, this is a problem, right? We have things that are dying. We don't have the bees in order to pollinate our food anymore. So now we got to develop like a drone that can sit there and pollinate our avocado trees and all that kind of stuff, or corn, and all that. All the food, I think it's like 60 or 70% of food comes from bees. So time is not our ally when it comes to climate action. The planet could be on the track for global warming of perhaps 2.5 degrees Celsius by the year 2100, a future that that is not only too imaginable, but perhaps even optimistic. On this middle-of-the-road climate path, the oceans could sit a full half-meter higher in 2072 than they did in 1900, climbing perhaps another 20 centimeters by 2100. That's like really conservative from what I've heard. The global effects of climate change, from droughts to wildfires to extreme rainfall, and over the coming decades, air pollution impacts from prolonged use of fossil fuels could easily claim hundreds of millions of years of human life. Yeah, I mean, air pollution is a big, huge problem, obviously. And these are all things that we should want to care about. I guess my bigger point is, how can we get people involved and actually care about this issue? Because this is what people hear. This is what people have been hearing constantly. People don't care. This has not been working. So the idea of, the world being really bad in 2100, it's not making people change. And that's a huge problem that we have. We have to figure out how we can change this with more short-term solutions. How can we measure things in the short term that could lead us to a better future, and also emissions would go down over time as technology increases? That's the bigger question. Like what are the short-term steps that we can make in order to lead us to that good outcome? And in my opinion, it's so simple. In ecology, this is well known. Environmental health is what we need. Human health is tied to environmental health. And environmental health is actually we know what it is. It's two things. Environmental health is tied to, one, the number of species in an area, so biodiversity. So we can either conserve biodiversity, or we can reconstruct that biodiversity by reintroducing animals. So, for example, the reintroduction of salmon in California that went extinct. That was there 20 years ago, but now it's went extinct, and now it can come back because, hopefully, conservation efforts. Two, so we have one, the amount of species that live there, just the amount of different types of species. And then two, how many animals are actually there? How many animals of each species? And what that does is that it increases the amount of genetic mutations that exist in that population, and then they're more stable as you go forward because they're more easily, they can more easily withstand factors that would help, push them to extinction. So it's called biotic and abiotic factors. So biotic factors would be anything biological, so viruses, infections, and then two, you have abiotic. So abiotic would be like an environmental change, temperature change, water changing, that kind of thing. So we know how to make ecosystems healthy. And the nice thing about that is, zoning laws and zoning laws in the country, in the United States, are at the local level. So we can do this. We can make a big difference at the local level, and it's tangible, and we can actually track it. So we can track it, see how we're doing, see what happens, and then we can have like those short-term rewards going forward, as opposed to, hey, we're going to do this, I want to buy an electric car. But how did that impact CO2 ppms on the global level? How would I measure that? If I bought a Tesla today, how would I know the impact it has on the environment? I could do a life cycle analysis like we just saw, but I want the more direct impact, I think, is better. And that would help people care more. In the face of such threats, anti-nuclear movements continue to fixate upon concerns do not have merit. Some nuclear opponents continue to express worries over safety, uranium mining, or the safe storage of spent fuel. Okay, I would say that those are all problems, so let's see what they say. Such anxieties are understandable, but they are based on misleading and outdated perception of nuclear technology. Nuclear technology today remains statistically one of the safest sources of energy, on par with wind and solar. Okay. I mean, that makes sense, I guess, compared to what would the other ones be? Like fracking and mining, coal mining? And yeah, coal. So, coal mining, it's probably not that safe. So, next generation designs possess inherent safety advantages that will make tomorrow's reactor orders of magnitude safer still, such as highly temperate resistant fuels and passive cooling systems. Techniques for uranium mining have improved, with much of today's uranium produced via in situ injection of solvents into uranium-bearing rock rather than traditional pit or underground mining. Okay. And so it's like a fracking approach then. So they're not doing like the mining. They're kind of pulling the uranium out, in situ injection of solvents. That's fracking. They're doing fracking. Meanwhile, both the transportation and storage of spent fuel from power plants have demonstrated admirable safety records, from recycling of used fuel to underground storage to techniques for sealing nuclear materials in layers of glass. The solutions for spent fuel also continue to multiply. Other nuclear skeptical climate activists claim not to be opposed to the technology, but disqualify nuclear power on the basis of its price tag. This is one of the things I don't think that holds that many merits, because you can't put a price on saving the environment. Yet expense is a questionable justification for opposition, given how such groups often argue, rightly, that society should eagerly pay any price to cut emissions, given the colossal costs climate change will exact on future generations. Again, I mean, it's just, I guess because it's nuclear energy, the only thing that they're arguing about is emissions, but it's so tiring for me to hear this stuff, and it just seems to be the only thing that people care about or want to talk about is emissions, and it's such a small percentage of things. Activist groups are even campaigning hard to shut down existing nuclear power plants that provide abundant, affordable, clean energy and whose construction costs are no longer remotely relevant. Prominent environmental NGOs like the Natural Resources Defense Council have issued public celebratory statements from the decommissioning of nuclear power plants. Nor are nuclear opponents limiting themselves to blocking nuclear power solely with their home countries. Perceiving an opportunity to preemptively rescue developing nations from nuclear energy, development and environmental groups have supported bans on international financing of nuclear power plants in Africa and Asia. Such policies may leave nuclear energy inaccessible to many low and middle income countries that lack the capacity to self-finance nuclear power plants. Well, there you go. If they can't afford it, what? I mean, are you gonna have the IMF come in and allow them to cheap interest rates for nuclear power plants? I mean, if they don't. This is the thing. It's like, why of all the things, why would be a non-renewable source of energy? Why would that be the one that we indebt the nations on? If I was a developing nation, I wouldn't want to go in debt to have a nuclear power plant when I could have a wind farm, or I have space for a wind farm or a solar farm or anything like that. It just seems very weird to I don't know. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Countries like Bangladesh that have nevertheless chosen to develop nuclear energy have done so not only with limited Western international support, but often in the face of direct opposition by Western activists. Yeah, I mean, this is a big thing. Like, it's hard for us as the United States to go to them and say that this is how you'd have to run your country. And I don't think that we should be doing that. But we should allow and develop and research really good technologies that they want to buy and make it accessible, make it easy. Not have this huge hefty price tag on nuclear. I guess we could finance and research, good nuclear options too. I'm not saying that shouldn't happen, but it's just, all about this nuclear ban. In many cases, opponents of nuclear power are even willing to accept climate trade-offs in order to shut down or block nuclear projects. In California, temporary emergency fossil gas generators are being planned to fill the void left by the promised closure of the state's last nuclear facility. In Taiwan, government leaders are seeking to build new gas terminals rather than reconsider a nuclear phase-out. In uranium-rich Australia, a 1998 ban on nuclear power is approaching its 25th anniversary, even as the country's energy system remains under the grip of a powerful coal and gas interests. Yeah, there's so much more. Okay. Yeah. And we did see that. We did see that. That's what this. This went down like this. This went up like this. But then the natural gas still went down over time. That's good, right? Right. You know, I mean, it's correlation, not causation, right? We don't know exactly if it was, and Dr. Radar in Homozygotes chat actually said that the solar was being planned for a while, so that makes sense. But man, solar is definitely climbing. Wind, not so much. It's interesting how much wind power there was, and then how it hasn't really grown that much compared to how much solar is. I mean, it did go down though. It did go down. So they're wrong on that one. Okay, other sources of clean energy. Clean electricity can help carry the torch of climate action, but they may struggle to replace harmful fossil energy without nuclear power. While nobody doubts the theoretical ability of wind, solar, hydropower, and hydrogen, hydrogen's like that is an interesting one, but like it's extremely reactive to air. So it's insane the safety problems. In hydrogen, to do most of the hard work for decarbonization, challenges will arrive in practice. Land-scarce countries like Korea, Taiwan, and Japan will struggle to site new solar and wind farms after exhausting optimal locations. Yeah, that's what I've been saying. I agree with that. Key raw materials, including lithium, cobalt, and copper, and rare earth minerals, may run short, particularly if local and environmental opposition to new mining projects constrains supplies and drives up costs. But the same problem exists for uranium. Isn't uranium even less? And how abundant is uranium on Earth compared to lithium, cobalt, copper, and all the rare earth minerals? And that is a problem with that. That is a problem with batteries too. And what does nuclear rely on? Batteries. So this same argument can be used against nuclear. So because there's no way, unless you have a nuclear reactor on your car, it's not. Maybe in 2070 they do, like this article says. I don't know. Even in hypothetically spacious countries like Canada, Australia, and the US, local communities have increasingly opposed nearby clean energy projects and transmission lines, slowing and constraining development. There may not be enough clean hydrogen to cover non-electricity forms of energy demand across sectors like shipping, fertilizer, industrial heat, a bottleneck that might prolong humanity's reliance on fossil fuels. Yeah, this is like not in my backyard kind of stuff. It's not wrong. I totally understand that, to be honest with you. I get it. It's frustrating. I'm sure power lines, like they were saying, power lines when electricity came aboard, transmission lines, you can bury them. You can bury the lines. There's ways of getting around it. I guess I'm so used to it in California. We haven't buried the power lines, and I'm just so used to seeing it. So I don't really care. But I'm sure they would care a lot less if they actually had jobs and working on them and all that kind of stuff too. So there's a lot of things that looks kind of weird at first, like a big factory with plumes of water exhaust coming out. Probably a weird sight at first, but then they get used to it, just like those fans and all that kind of stuff. Nuclear generation can alleviate many of these constraints. It is land efficient, materials efficient, reliable, and co-produces heat and hydrogen. Is this guy's like I understand it's a nuclear piece, but geez, there's no like bad argument for nuclear on this guy. Stubborn opposition to nuclear energy, however, threatens to leave us saddled with an even more difficult path to a carbon-free future than the one we already face. Our grandchildren will not judge us kindly for such short-sightedness. Oh my God. It's like, it's one issue, and it's a subset of one issue. One possible solution. There's just no way. It just doesn't have that big of an impact. You know, I mean, in the future, climate impacts are severe and widespread. One of the biggest news stories of 2072 is a report from the marine biologists that over 90% of tropical coral reefs have bleached white. I mean, that's not surprising at all. In equatorial regions, outdoor labor law now takes place at night to avoid mortally dangerous conditions for workers. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely, I see that happening for sure. When it's, I mean, personally, like where I live, it gets up to like 115. And I actually enjoy like 100 degrees. I like actually enjoy. I'm a little weird. You feel the sun on your skin. It feels good. You're sweating a little bit. I don't know. A little nice little breeze. I kind of like it. But 115, it's like the sun is caustic. It's like your body is saying, this is too much. So to actually do like work is in like manual labor outdoors, like there's no way. I mean, it's not it doesn't work. I mean, personally, when it's in the summer and it's that hot, I don't do any labor outside. I wait till nighttime. I do it at night, you know, for the same reasons. So, I mean, I can already see that happening. Climate summits involve continued arguments over climate injustice, thorny climate adaptation efforts, and stubbornly enduring fossil fuel emissions. To be clear, the warm climate will be a product of much more than just a single technology choice. Nuclear power is an upward trajectory, but is not single-handedly enable humanity to limit global warming to 1.5 to 1 or 1.8. Climate change was and remains a global challenge far beyond the capacity of one technology to solve alone. But prevailing consensus 50 years from today will be that more nuclear energy would unequivocally have helped. I mean, you see that like a lot of things. That's the problem. It's like, it's like there's so many things. Like, what if we put all the energy from nuclear into making solar panels or solar roads? That's a thing. You can actually have roads that have solar panels on them. What if we put hundreds of millions of dollars into that these people are talking that we need to, put into this, nuclear idea? It's like, maybe that could have been where we went. Maybe it could have been, iron, using iron there's these geoengineering ideas, which are just, in my opinion, get a little nutty, get a little weird. I don't think that we should be messing with the oceans anymore. We already mess with them enough. Let's chill, give the oceans a chance to recoup. But right now, there's some people talking about geoengineering solutions in order to bring CO2 down as kind of like a huge sink event, a carbon sink event. And you seed iron into the oceans so that all these algae blooms takes down a bunch of the CO2 and they die and sink with it. I'd rather not geoengineer anything. Let's stop messing with the planet. Half a century prior, major environmental groups had disparaged nuclear power as a regrets solution. Yet, if the people of 2072 were to name one regret about nuclear energy, it was that they had not built more of it sooner. It's like, Jesus. That's like the one thing, dude. Like, the one thing? Like, it's just like, you know what I mean? Like, gosh, I just don't. It's so frustrating